Hey, well, entrepreneurs, business owners, and leaders, welcome to the Thrive Collective. This is your show designed to help you do three things. We want to help you make more money, avoid costly mistakes, and fully integrate your faith into your life and leadership. I am Rob Hughes, your host, and it's a joy to serve you in this way. I'll tell you what, if you look at the business landscape, the news media, culture, pressures, there's so much that we battle as people of faith in business and in the marketplace today. So I have a question for you. What does success look like? If you had to define the term success, how would you define it? Does success mean more growth? Does success mean better than the competition? What does success look like for you? And as we look, we can answer that question a lot of different ways. One source we might look for is Scripture. What does God's infallible word, authoritative word, share with us when it comes to success? How would we define that? Well, I can tell you this. The Bible is chock full of contradictory or upside down to common culture ideas. For instance, love your enemy, Matthew 5:44. Would loving your enemy be good for a believer? I mean, most of you who have read that in Matthew, you'd say, yeah, Jesus said it, read words, love your enemy. But would you include that in a successful life? Loving your enemy. It's an upside down idea, but it's so right side up from a kingdom perspective. Number two, giving is better than receiving. Did the idea of generosity make its way to your definition of success? Well, if Acts chapter 20, verse 35 informs that, it probably should. Giving is better than receiving. This is, again, upside down to culture, but so right side up in the kingdom perspective. And then maybe a third one here. The first will be last, and the last shall be first. Mark 10:31. That's an upside down conversation to say to be successful, we'd actually be last. We'd actually be the servant. And so today I'm so excited to share with you a very dear friend of mine. Jeff Doolittle is an organization consultant. He's the president and CEO of his business, organizationaltalent.com. Jeff has been helping businesses of all sizes, including Fortune 50, Forbes top 25 private, both for-profit and nonprofit. He's been helping them create a leadership culture, a servant leadership culture from the ground up, and transforming the culture of the organizational leadership as a result of his work and what he's got to share. And so he's going to be sharing with us this idea of what does it look like to lead well, to lead from a servant mentality, because ultimately I do think that there's a scriptural precedent that would support this. And as followers of Christ in the marketplace, it's our opportunity to put the towel over our arm and to love and support the teams that we lead, the clients we serve, and every relationship. It's a stewardship mindset. And so today, Jeff is going to be sharing with us how to be better servant leaders, but then ultimately, there's two key, very costly mistakes that leaders often make in their leadership, and Jeff's going to help us avoid them. And so, Thrive Collective family, would you welcome with me Mr. Jeff Doolittle? Jeff?
Hey, everyone. Yeah, thanks. And Rob, man, that is an awesome introduction and fits so well with what we're going to be talking about, this paradox, right, that exists within Scripture, and how we're going to be talking about leading versus serving and rules versus exceptions. And those two very things that seem like they're sit on opposite ends of each other can really get leaders caught up into some really costly mistakes.
So Jeff, I just would love to hear from you. What are some of the ideas that you have on your mind regarding leadership in today's culture, and some of the ideas that you prepared to share with us today?
Sure. So, leading to in today's world is it's a fast-paced game, and COVID, if anything, is what it's done is really, I think it's created a validation test for organizations around values, what they espouse, and what they really stand behind. And it's a real testing time for our leaders. And you can describe the current economy as volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This VUCA kind of concept, and that I see that in spades across organizations, and leaders are fastly trying to run through and figure out what to do, but they're struggling. And in this speed of rushing to things that perceive that issues that seem like they are the right thing to do or are one-sided, really in reality, there's you can look at it differently and come to different conclusions. So the issue of let's just take these down. The issue of leading versus serving. Again, you think leading on one side, serving on the other, but this is really when you view it as opposite sides, it's a failure to recognize that you actually can become a better leader through serving. These don't sit on opposite sides, but they really work together. And then there's the area of rules versus exceptions. And again, you think, well, the best, having clear rules. And I saw this in HR all the time, where people would come in and you would think, well, man, you had this, hiring the best talent, or do you have the rules around how you should hire the talent, and how do these things sit on opposite sides? How do you work in it? But the best rules actually allow for exceptions. And to get there, though, we have to shift our mindset. We have to look at things, look at these challenges, and look at it differently. And the challenge for leaders is that our culture actually influences our thinking. So you've got all these competing factors in the marketplace, right? You got the fact that it's moving fast. You've got the fact that it's things are dynamic. COVID's testing us. You've got the issues of just the fact of leading versus serving, and then our background, our culture, which is the one thing that influences everything that we have. And these things just create situations where we have we make decisions, and we can make them, and if we see them as opposites, these conflicts as opposite, it creates leads to cost in the business. And the cost is when I see leaders happen, it's actually even unconscious. They're doing these things without them knowing about it. They're just be acting and reacting to the environment. The cost it hits is ones of revenue, reduced revenue, increased cost, as well as which is hard labor costs when we talk about productivity and efficiency in the business. And the other one I see is opportunity cost, and these things are huge. So let's take up with leading and serving. To think about this differently, what if we consider this concept? Some people think, well, if I'm a leader, I sit on top of the pyramid, and my employees are there to serve me. But when we think about empowering people, and we can flip that and start to think about how do we leverage these people to really achieve these results, we enable and collaborate with them, we can actually increase our productivity. And the way that happens is through this concept called intrinsic motivation. And that simply is just discretionary effort, ability to give things that are beyond what you would expect. So as a leader, you could be, I like to use the example, you see two employees walking into work. One walks right by, both of them see a piece of trash on the floor. One walks right by, the other stops and picks it up. What's that difference? Because neither of them, maybe they both had same job expectations. You didn't tell them that this is something they had to do, but one of them decided to do that. And this gets into this concept of discretionary effort. When people will give you worthy performance, something that's really helpful to the business, but yet it's not something that you expected to do. And that discretionary effort, when employees show up and decide to give you more than even what you've expected, is a choice. And you get that through this concept of discretionary effort.
Absolutely brilliant, Jeff. This discretionary effort, the intrinsic motivation. I think a big challenge for small business owners as you begin building out your team and hiring, you may start with a subcontractor to kind of, test the waters a little bit. But then when you formally make the commitment to involve W-2 payroll staff and you take that business risk to bring others into your fold and under your leadership care, you really do have a responsibility to create an environment that they are intrinsically motivated to serve. Now, part of that is on them. I mean, clearly, you can't force people to be intrinsically motivated. But I reflect on an author, Daniel Pink, wrote a book a few years ago, Drive, Drive, powerful, powerful, and he lays out this formula in there, this purpose, autonomy, and mastery to really unleash the intrinsic motivation within your team. So leaders, I'm curious, like, are you casting a clear, compelling vision? And I'm not just saying our vision is to increase by 2% each quarter. I'm not saying the data. I'm saying, are you telling your team what it matters? Like, why does it matter to grow? What does growth indicate? What difference is it making? And are you trusting your team members with that autonomy? And then ultimately, are you giving them the skills that they need, the coaching they need, the resources for mastery? That formula has always stuck in my mind, Jeff, as just a powerful intrinsic motivation. And I think when we do that, it puts us in that position of serving because we're thinking about what's important to the humans that the Lord's entrusted to our care in our leadership. Just a couple of thoughts, reflections there.
Yeah, definitely. That concept actually came to my mind too as I was thinking about this topic. So it's kind of fun to hear you coming up with it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Daniel Pink and his work, and it is there is a place for being direct and setting clear goals. If you have hourly employees that have measured outcomes, like I think about warehouse employees that have pick rates and things like that, that's good. But this concept of shifting between authoritarian and empowering or collaborative leadership is that nuance that I see really enabling the shift between leading and serving as opposites and being connected and actually together helping maximize profit. And so as leaders, we get caught up, we want that immediate gratification. We want that result. And so we think the shortest way to get there is let's just tell someone exactly what we need done. And if it's not getting done, keep putting the pressure on instead of thinking about how can we bring out the best in people, like what you said, how can we get people to give us more than what's expected, and that's that discretionary effort. And the potential here, I think, is just so huge for leaders because you're getting asked to do more with less, right? And or doing more with more, and whatever the challenge is that you're facing. And I think a lot of people are, faced with this more versus less reality right now. And how do you do that? You've already asked your teams. You've got well-defined processes. You're pushing people to get the work done. How do you get more out? How do you get more outcome? And in this concept of shifting our thinking can really enable this. And it's you think that, well, I'm backing out of my responsibility, and you're just shifting it. But with every great responsibility is the opportunity to do something different, and you can flip that and start to think, how do I serve my employees? And by doing that, which may seem at a paradox to setting the expectations, they can start to, you get more collaborative, participative kind of leadership styles that really bring out this drive that Daniel Pink talks about, or the intrinsic motivation or discretionary effort, these things that really are viewed as the holy grail within performance management. And it's a powerful impact on business with direct hard financial benefit of increased productivity and efficiency. And without that, you're missing the opportunity of what is really possible with people. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it, love it, love it. You got to get over that fear that, you can actually trust. You can lead with your heart, leaders. You can serve and lead your team. And Jeff is just encouraging us to do that. Yeah, I love it. So a big mistake, as I hear you saying here, Jeff, a big mistake is people, thinking leading and serving are a trade-off. Am I going to be that direct leader, or am I going to serve? And if I do one, I can't do the other. And if I hear you right, you're saying it's kind of a combination, a blending.
Exactly. It's when we think that things are opposite ends of the continuum that we make a mistake. We think that It's either leading, and that sits on one very far side, or serving, and that sits on another. But what I want to talk to you about is, just as a leader, how do you bend that linear line and actually connect it so that you see that actually one enabling the other versus one sitting on opposite ends of the other. It's not a matter of choosing one or the other. It's a matter of how do these both work together to then bring out the best in people. And it's that shift in mindset, which again, we're not set up for that. I mean, we've got this competing pressures. We've got the marketplace. We've got our culture influencing us. That's maybe even saying, well, leader needs to do this, because that's what I grew up seeing. I grew up seeing a leader that does this. And so we have all these influences pulling on us. But in that choice of opportunity of leadership, we have the choice to decide how we want to approach this. And if we can look at the two actually maximizing and enabling each other, then we can really see real big advancements. And the same thing happens with rules and exceptions. When we think that it's my best rules are those that are just clearly say this is all that you can do, we miss that opportunity of what is possible in the moment. And every organization has rules. And I'm not saying we throw out rules, we throw out legalities. No. But what if we look at it differently and start to see that actually the best rules and allow for exceptions rather than restricting those? So, how do we listen to our employees, listen to the different points of view, and incorporate those into what we process from a rule, enabling this a better outcome as a result? There's
So,
that shift unlocks this intrinsic motivation and discretionary effort.
so this rules versus exceptions, the second mistake that leaders can find themselves making. Give us a tangible example, Jeff. What does this look like in real life in some of the organizations that you've consulted?
Sure. So, okay, here's one. So, an organization, a international organization, it offices in different countries, and they were working on a problem. They needed to create efficiency and opportunity in the business. And a common one to obtain that efficiency is to start looking at standardization, right? You start to say, well, how do we do things more consistently? And then we look at systems that we select to support that work. So that way you don't have two different systems. You start now to leverage scale and size, right? So that's a common dynamic. We look at how do we gain efficiency. In fact, almost every company I'm working with, it's how do you continually gain efficiency within the business? It's driving cost out, right? So a real case here is a HR organization that has now to look at hiring, which is done in both countries, all around all their operations, but yet they need to come up with a consistent system that to save cost. So that system drives standardization. Systems don't work well if you have all multiple levels of processes all happening within the same system. It just can't work. It becomes very costly from a design perspective and inefficient. So now the two teams having to work on this issue had to decide, what is the best way to hire? And right there, that's when problems can happen. You start to look at best and say, well, this is the best, and that is not the best. And that creates this concept of, well, let's lock things down into what is the best. And even that discussion creates tension, right? Because now it's not recognizing that the different situations, different environments, and that whole best approach can actually lock us into conflict and actually then not lead to the best. So working with organizations, coming in and helping these leaders see that by taking this mindset of, even though if we take the serving and leading concept, by serving and listening and empowering employees, you can start to identify all of the potential exceptions that are needed to the standard approach that allow then both organizations to get what they need, and for the organization as a whole to succeed by having a process and solution and a system that actually meets those needs. So that's a common in that issue of best or right and wrong, or is something that gets influenced by culture, and it plays out in companies whether it's international or even it's in between departments within the same local organization that happens. So this mindset of seeing continuums with opposite ends versus looking at things holistically. And so how do you get there? How do you get to where you can see this? And that is changing your thinking to start to see this concept of how do I serve, how do I help my employees achieve their best versus coming in with this is the best and this is what I need. That shift, and it plays out, and that again leads to intrinsic motivation and discretionary efforts. So uh, it's looking instead of saying linear thinking of again a continuum, start thinking cyclical, looking at things from their interconnectedness and that they're not on opposite ends. How can I bend that conversation so that they're both enabling each other versus competing with each other? How do I look at communication and interactions instead of being one way to actually being two way? How do I engage people and start to pull out their best so that it's a back and forth? How can I stop seeing as opposites again, stop seeing different sides, and start seeing a combined approach of how can we work together and be collaborative? How can my stepping back from the situation and empowering others actually create a better result instead of just being top down and me influencing what is happening? How can I get that true bottom up? And you talk about working in a different environment. You work in an environment that holds the cyclical, two-way, combined, holistic thinking, and that's what creates this intrinsic motivation. That's what creates this discretionary effort. It brings out the best in people.
Yeah, amen, amen. And I think about, there's got to be, somebody listening in right now. You've got 20, 30, maybe more people that are on your team. You're a growing small business. And you know what? To some extent, somebody, in terms of leadership, they may be caught listening to this, Jeff, and thinking, man, how do I reverse this culture? I've been taking a bit more of a direct approach before and not really thinking about servant leadership or the continuum. So talk for a moment, if you would. What advice would you give someone that looks at this and says, okay, I've already got an existing momentum that's heading in a negative direction. How do I reverse that? What advice would you give that business owner?
Yeah, I would say, hey, you're not alone first, okay? I can tell you too. I've received coaching in my own life, and it seems counterintuitive sometimes, and I look at it, and then I even pick it up and try it, and it doesn't feel good. My golf game, for example. I mean, I've been told forever, you got to change how you hold the club to get the ball to go straight down the fairway. And then I change it, and it goes straight, but it only goes a few yards, and I get frustrated, right? And I go, this isn't good. I want to go back to where maybe I was hitting it, but I wasn't. It was at least going further. It's change, and it is difficult. But how do you get there? One is that coaching element, right? Is getting some feedback on how you're current, where are you currently? So assessing what style you're currently using, and that's not going to be something. You can start with yourself, but really engaging and asking others for feedback is a powerful part of the process. So leadership 360s, assessments out there, they're really good to help you start to understand where you're at. And once you know yourself and where you're starting from, then you can start to sprinkle in that coaching and that advice. There's some great leaders out there. There's some great books on servant leadership. I think of Dare to Serve. That's a really nice book. There's also Greenleaf and Spears have their kind of Greenleaf is viewed as one of the founders of servant leadership, and just some really great thought leadership on this journey of servant leadership. And you start to then take in some knowledge around this. There's also, in fact, I'm going to be hosting a free webinar around servant leadership, just the concept, and taking advantage of these resources that are out there to help start to learn. So you've got now, where you're starting, you've started to get some knowledge and understanding around this. And then it's time to start applying it. And I realized, like my golf game, that it's going to be times where it's not going to feel right. It's actually going to feel a little wrong. And that's okay. Lean into that feeling and understand that it's a change, natural part of the change process. and that we're going to look to start to move. But then step back and measure how you're doing. So don't just stop there, try it. And I'm not talking about major course correction things. If you're a leader and you've been hired into the role, I hope that you've been hired because of you've been able to lead and be successful with what you've been doing. We're talking about how do you make some course corrections to start to shift your thinking here and shift your actions, and then measure how you're doing, get that course correction feedback and adjust. Just don't give up and revert back, but try it. And realize these things are going to take time. Shifting leadership style and approach is not something that your people are going to automatically then just start to change. It's not going to instantly happen. They're going to need to see trust. They're going to, and trust through consistency. Are you going to be this way consistently, or are you going to go back to how you used to be? And over time, when you develop that trust with your employees, that's what starts to unlock this possibility. And so I think that I'm a big fan of you measure, you start with measuring, you learn, you apply, you practice, and then you measure again, and you continue kind of improving and recognizing it's not a destination. We're not going after perfection. It's a process of achieving excellence.
You think about this, entrepreneurs and leaders. I mean, in the absence of healthy servant leadership culture, assuming that maybe there's some room for you to improve, there's probably some cultural coping mechanisms that have been developed. If you're listening to this show, chances are you're a successful person. You've already achieved what the marketplace would say is successful. Like you've gained business traction. You've got a team. So here's the deal. Whether or not you take Jeff's advice, you've got a culture and a pattern anyway. You have existing momentum. But in the absence of doing it in a healthy way, what are some of the coping mechanisms? Maybe we throw staff at our problem. We say, oh, we just got to hire more people. Or we look at turnover and we say, it's just what business is, just what industry is. How much does it cost you to replace top talent if you're ever able to? How much does it cost you to not fully unleash the full productivity of your workforce? Without making a change, without organizing your talent in such a way, servant leadership as Jeff is sharing, there are costs. You're just not seeing it on your P&L. And so, like anything else, what Jeff is sharing, I think is absolutely brilliant. You could go read the books. As a matter of fact, I think you've got really three options here. We're talking about servant leadership today. You probably have three options. The first option, let's be honest, call a spade, is to do nothing. Chances are, there's a lot of you that are listening in. They'll say, this was great. This is nice. Yeah, servant leadership, and then do nothing with it. You probably get more of what you got today. And that's perfectly acceptable if you're okay with that. Step two is, option two, maybe you go out and find some of these books, read them, and do the DIY path. And quite frankly, plan to become a fractional operations optimizer, a fractional coach for yourself, to do that. And if you've got the time and capacity to go on the DIY path, I think that's a great one for you. And we would bless that. But option three, if you really want to fast track your culture transformation, Jeff does this. This is his jam. So I would say reach out to organizational talent and hire Jeff or a consultant and bring somebody in, because here's the deal. As a StoryBrand certified guide, I see this all the time. Businesses are so close. Small business owners are so close to their product, their service, their teams. They have a hard time being objective and seeing things clearly. And if we could just, go further and say you need a guide. You need somebody who's willing to step into your shoes with you and take the journey with you. And that is exactly what Jeff does.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, no, I was just, sorry, Jeff. I was just going to chime in that coaching is a powerful tool. And if you haven't experienced it in your life, it's just someone to come alongside, really help you achieve your goals and objectives, and help carry that weight along with you and create smart objectives to accomplish it. So it's a powerful enabler to change, and especially in an area that's so important to you as leading and with your employees.
So, Jeff, I got to tell you, this conversation, I think there's no possible way to contain it in one podcast. So
Mhm.
maybe we'll have you back in the future to future episodes as well to continue our dialogue. But I do know that you created a helpful resource for the Thrive Collective community as well. We'll plan to be sharing this with you. Look for a link in the show notes of how you can access this. Costly leadership mistakes. Jeff has created an infographic for us to kind of summarize some of the key points of some of the items that he shared with us. And there's a couple of bonus items in here too. And we talked about two of these issues: the leading versus serving, rules versus exceptions. But then also, he's got some tips in here that you can only access if you get the resource: the avoidable costs, the hard labor costs, opportunity costs, and also thinking differently in some ways to really embrace thinking differently. So Jeff, thank you for making this available. And again, this will be available in a link in the show notes wherever you're consuming this podcast. Jeff, I would just defer to you. Any closing remarks, encouragement for our Thrive Collective family, and then as a part of that, help us understand how can we best get a hold of you if somebody wants to have a conversation.
Sure. I think, Rob, let's go back to where we started and your talk this morning, as we kicked off the show today, and the paradox. And as a Christian, our faith, and I know we've been talking hard on the servant leadership aspect, and there's a lot of support within Scripture for it. And I think of right now James and the book of James, and I think about you want to talk about a leader in a difficult time, and an approach to how vision. And so the Bible holds a lot of keys and answers for leaders. If we look at the leaders within the Bible, how did they approach these challenging times? And asking God for guidance and wisdom is a great way to begin. And when it comes down to additional support, I would love to be a resource for the Thrive Collective here, and whether that's in a personal journey towards servant leadership, or it's how do we introduce this concept into an organization and help an organization around shifting the leadership culture within that they have. And you can do that through just reaching out to me through organizationaltalent.com, all one word, and or you can just give me a call at 616-803-9020, and I can be a resource for you just to have a conversation about what's going on, what you're looking, and what your challenges are, and or if you just want to explore this topic a little bit further. And there's, like Rob said, there's so much more we could talk about, and there's a lot of resource, practical advice out there for you to help you in your role as a leader.
Excellent, excellent. Jeff, it's just such an honor to have you part of the Thrive Collective family. Thank you for investing in this episode with all of us. Some of your wisdom you'd be willing to share. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thrive Collective, remember, this is for you, entrepreneurs, business owners, and leaders. This is your podcast designed to help you make more money, avoid costly leadership mistakes, and fully integrate your faith into your life and leadership. I am Rob Hughes, your host. It was a joy to serve you today. Thank you, and we'll see you at the next episode. Take care.